Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. We are so glad that you've joined us today. Whether you're watching this or you're listening to this, we are so glad that you are here. We hope that you're encouraged today, and we hope that your week is going well. And we pray that God blesses you through this podcast. We are in the studio today. Brian Sevitz is with us today, and we are joined by Jessi Harper today in the studio. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get to her and everything, we just want to thank the sponsor of the week. We are so blessed to be sponsored this week by ice cream sandwiches. I don't know if these were a favorite in your household over the summer, but they were a favorite in mine, and I plan on eating one during this podcast. Would you care for one?
She can have mine.
You already got. She already got something.
I'll eat it afterwards.
We'll let this melt right here.
I'll get it all over me.
Brian, tell them the reason that we are doing ice cream sandwiches as a sponsor.
Well, Sunday we had our Father's Day Classic, and this was one of the snacks, and we really just wanted to bring it up because we're thankful for the class and the people that put that together, because it was great once again. Mm-hmm. The weather cooperated.
Barely.
Nobody was going to, pray the rain away, especially farmers.
I might have. Oh, yeah.
However, we were happy that it held off for that couple of hours.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so I just got to be a participant Sunday in that. And there was a lot of people that brought their cars and tractors or whatever, and then other people that helped out. So we're thankful for that. Yeah,
so if you don't know, the Transformers class, which happens at 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings, they meet back in room 405, 406. It's just a Sunday school group that you can join. They do a great job. Lots of different topics that they go through, different studies. They put it on. They've done it for the last 3 years, 3 years, and their class gets together, selects all the stuff, gets volunteers together, and it's really nice that you and I on Father's Day, we don't have to plan any of that. So that's a great gift for all dads. Anyway, so we wanted to thank them, and we hope that you enjoyed it, and I get to enjoy the leftover ice cream sandwiches at church. All right, we have to review this past Sunday, and for that I have to turn it over to Mr. Brian Sevitz because he preached this past Sunday.
Yeah, so of course it was great having my parents here, and I had asked Dad to come. At first I thought about getting him up and doing a little interview thing, but he's having knee surgery this week, and people that saw him, he was not even able to stand. Yep. He's about to have a total knee replacement. So I just did some illustrations, and of course my dad's story doesn't follow Jephthah's story. I mean, he wasn't born, he's not the son of a prostitute or anything like that. But I just thought when we were thinking about Father's Day and lining up with that sermon, and when I would preach, I thought, well, that would be cool to just use my dad as an illustration of a couple of those points.
Did you tell him ahead of time that you were going to do some stories? I know you invited him to come, but did he have a say in what you could or could not share?
No. And in fact, he clarified one thing. He has an associate's degree. I said he didn't finish his degree. He has an associate's degree. He didn't finish his bachelor's degree, which the point still applies. I mean, he's the manager of a big company now, and associate's degree, and I always was pushed. One of the points, of course, was just chasing after your dreams, and I think if they are God-given dreams, God isn't limited by those things. Not everybody. I mean, I love Central. I love the fact that my parents gave me the opportunity to go to college and pushed us to do that and all that. But not everybody's supposed to go to college. And I used to work for the college, and I would still say that not everybody is supposed to be there or at any college. But that was just one little part of the sermon. I wrote down just a few things I hope. I said maybe we should recap each other's sermons and make sure that the point got across.
I think that's a good idea.
We wanted to get across, but what I hope came across was this. One of them was just that kind of a guy who was a reject became a ruler. And that's just God uses our strengths and our weaknesses. And the second thing was be honest and follow through and treat others well. And that's going to serve you well in all areas of life. Even if it doesn't look like it in the moment, that this truth will be helpful if I actually say it. Usually that's the best thing to do. And I think it's sometimes hard to follow through on that, though. And then another thing that I said Sunday, especially with respect to parenting, is the cycles of generational sin and dysfunction can be broken. And we know people in our church who like are first generation Christians, or they've finally, maybe their parents, grandparents were like lifelong addicts, and they've turned the page for their family. And I think that I was hoping to challenge people in that way as well. And then the last one was just listen to the voice of God and be available for what he wants you to do, and then follow through on it. And I had used the strids a little bit to illustrate that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite points that you made, was sometimes just making yourself available and being able to hear God's voice is a huge part.
And that might have been a little bit of a stretch with the Jephthah story. That was one of those parts where I was like, well, I'm giving my opinion of what that one little verse means. I don't really know. I don't think anyone can say exactly what that meant when it said basically he recited his plans or recited the agreement before the Lord. That's a little bit of a weird phrase, but that's what I think it was. And like I said, that wasn't just my idea. I had kind of looked at 6 or 8 different people and looked at what they thought about it. And I thought, even if that's not exactly what happened there, I think it's a point we can draw out that's a great one for us to remember.
Yeah. Jessi, how was your Sunday? What'd you do?
I was in Iowa.
That's right, you weren't here.
I wasn't. My niece got baptized, so we went.
It seems like everybody we interview hasn't been to church that week.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's all about. Your niece got baptized. That's exciting.
It was exciting.
Okay, cool.
So,
was it a good service? And
yeah, it was interesting. That's probably a conversation for another.
No, we got to do it in front of everybody now.
Well, it's like that. My family is Baptistic, so the sermon was on Romans 6, and their interpretation of baptism.
So it was their baptism Sunday then?
It was baptism Sunday.
Yeah, that's good. Side note for everybody, this podcast is made way better when you're eating an ice cream sandwich. It's just way more enjoyable. Well, it was a good Sunday. I always enjoy getting the break to do something different and to lead music, and we had some newer people on the stage, and I thought Brian did a great job bringing out Jephthah's story and then also bringing it into his own life and using the example of his father and his parents to help encourage us in our faith. So we hope that you had a great Sunday. If you missed the service, go to tlcc.church. Just go to tlcc.church and you can watch the service online. And we hope that you catch up. Next week, we will finish up this series in Judges with Samson, and that'll be a good sermon. I've always enjoyed talking and preaching about Samson, so I'm excited about that. Okay, let's move on to the TLCC Top 3. Through the summer, there's not a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot going on, but there's not always a whole lot of stuff that we have to announce to you. The first one we'll let you know about is the camp celebration. Every year, after camp, they do a camp celebration. It's a big potluck. People get together, and then we have a worship service, and then there's always a featured speaker. And this year's featured speaker is Alan Todd, our former student minister here that left us and went down under to Australia. And he is going to not be traveling back, but he's going to be coming to us live via the wonders of technology. So
we hope.
Well, we were just saying earlier, if we know anything about camp, stuff doesn't work the way you want it to. So we're hopeful that will happen. Okay, and then we got to let you know about something that Rachel Busen and Alec Busen have been doing here at the church building on Fridays. Brian, you want to tell them about this one?
I'll try. I haven't been to it, but Preston has. It's at 6 p.m. Friday evenings, and it's Ultimate Frisbee. I think it's out here in the back parking lot, and Preston loved it last week. I think it's the first one he was able to go to, and they're trying to do it every Friday at 6. And of course, they are kind of inviting students and parents, but he's like, it can be open to other people too if you love Ultimate Frisbee and want to play Ultimate Frisbee with some of the students. It's just for fun.
Yeah, there's no agenda other than getting people together. And even if you want to just connect with people outside of your group or get to know some of the students, it's a great environment, very relaxed. It happens Friday evenings. We're going to try it every Friday for a while from 6 to 8 p.m. So if you got nothing else going on and you want to participate, that's there for you. And then the final announcement, which will lead us into the spotlight of the week, is VBS is 2 weeks away. We are 2 weeks out. Wow. We've been talking about it for a while. There's been a lot of announcements, but we have Jessi Harper in the studio with us because she is the El Jefe, boss, director, queen of VBS, all the things. First and foremost, is there any announcements about VBS that you want to tell the people?
Just the same stuff we've been plugging. They could use a few more volunteers. Registration is open for kids age 4 through going into 5th grade. So invite your grandkids, your neighbors, anyone. I think there's still some stars on the wall. If you haven't gotten to donate a supply yet, you can pick up a star and return the supply by next weekend. And then the planet contest ends this Friday or this Sunday, or star or planet. So if you're making one of those, you got to turn that in by Sunday if you want it to get judged.
Yeah, I know my daughters are very excited about that, and I am not an artist, so
me neither.
We're trying, but they look really wonky. Okay, they just be prepared. But if you want to participate in that, they've asked if you want to bring some sort of model of a star or a planet. It's got to be hangable, and it's got to be, what was the size?
Like at least a ruler high and no bigger than a yardstick.
See, I thought you should have just let him go crazy, and people bring in Pluto, something.
We were going with that, but then we're like, what if that's all we get, and we need to fill our classrooms and
with little stuff,
and it has to fit through the door.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
And we need especially like the preschool classrooms, we need them up.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Your thing will get hung. It just may not get judged if it's not turned in on time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It will get displayed.
Absolutely. So, if you kids can pre-register the morning of.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that would be registering.
Registering, not
yes.
Pre-registering.
Pre-registering would be very helpful though, so we can get them into crews ahead of time. And
that's always so helpful.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so it's coming up. I had a few questions for you, so we can get some background information. When did you start helping lead VBS? What made you even say, yeah, I can do that?
Well, I always said I was never going to do children's ministry. and
why is that?
Because I wasn't a children person, and God doesn't like it when you say never.
He does
and
not.
So he put me in children's ministry at our church in West Virginia. And so Walt was the youth and children's minister, and he hates planning things.
This is your husband?
My husband, Walt.
Was a student minister, and you're like, I don't want to do children because I hate this.
Yep, pretty much. And so he doesn't like planning, but VBS is a thing, and so I was like, I love planning, I will do VBS. So we made a pretty good team. He was like the front person, he did all that, and I was all the behind the scenes thing.
You did all the work, he got all the glory.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's okay. That's what we
That's all right.
So I started that in 2011.
Okay.
So then I took a few years break once we moved here, and then I went to Mary in 2018, and I said, I'm ready to plug back in however you can use me. And she said, do you want to do VBS? And
Take
I was
it. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, that's great. As a person who's been on both sides of ministry, you've been, your husband being paid to do ministry, and now your husband still is paid to do ministry, but just for a college, but now you're plugged into a church here. From your perspective, like as a volunteer / someone who's worked in churches before, was it difficult to get connected? Is it easier because you've seen both sides of things? And what would you say to someone who feels like they want to do something but is kind of intimidated by the thought of putting themselves out there?
I would say, to your question of is it difficult, I think it wasn't for me because I knew that there's always rules. There's always something to do. So I knew, hey, I can go ask this person or I can go talk to that person. But to someone who's new to a church, I think that is intimidating. I don't know where to start. They seem like it's a well-oiled machine and I don't know where to go. So that is intimidating. So I think you just got to start asking people, go to the ministers and say, hey, these are my talents, where can I fit in, type of thing. It's kind of what I did. Yep. And also, all those of us who are already connected could be better recruiters. Hey, I work in the children's ministry and I know that next week we need to have an opening here. Why don't you go talk to Mary about that or whatever? Or I work on the sound team, and I know that we're lacking in volunteers right now, so go talk to Brian. Or we could do better recruiting those of us who are already plugged.
And a lot of times people think, well, these roles are always full. Well, there might be someone that's served the last 12 years there that would love to take 2 or 3 months off or switch to something else. So they don't get burnt out. Yeah. And we've had people do that. And that's the problem of not having holes. I mean, some of the best recruiting is when something doesn't happen. And you're like, well, if you know, like there was one week we didn't have coffee.
This is going to melt, so I'm just going to get into it.
Go ahead.
It's going to melt. I might as well.
But the coffee bar, you know, we didn't have it one week, and I think the next week there were 2 people who volunteered.
Yeah.
Well, if the gap wasn't there one week, and I'm not saying that means that we just don't staff the nursery some week, you know, probably not the best idea, but
there might be some people that be like, okay, we have to have that. Yeah. No, that's a good point. To your point about doing something different, like this week is a good example because you got to preach, I got to do music. And it is refreshing to do something different. And if you're a volunteer and I always tell people, if you're like bitter and you hate serving and you're like, I don't ever want to go back, but I have to go back, like that's the time where you have to try something different or take a break. Like I want people to serve with a joyful heart, not with feeling like they are forced to. And so if you're someone newer and want to get plugged in, don't feel like you're going to take someone's spot or anything like that. People are sometimes needing help. There's always places to fill. Okay, so I want to talk about you personally now. Okay, we got a little bit of time, right? Yeah, we got some time. So you are married to a minister, and from your vantage point of the church and serving in the church and now serving in this kind of parachurch organization at the Christian college, what have you learned and what do you appreciate about the church as a whole? And what are some things that frustrate you about the church as a whole? Because you've seen things from both sides. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're getting into it now, and I'm going to eat my ice cream.
Well, I always... So I'm an Enneagram 1, so I'm always looking at things that can be improved, get better. So
the second part of the question
I can think of things that can... Yeah. So I think one of the things that has always bothered me about churches, and it goes along with what we're talking about, is volunteering, like the idea that I've served my time and I'm done now. That bothers me.
Why do you think people think that?
I think they get burnt out. They've worked their butt off, and maybe they served their time
raising their kids
24/7. Work, like they never got the breaks. So now it's their time for a break, and I can understand that. So it's hard for me to like be too upset about it, but at the same time, when we're trying to minister to people who are day in and day out with their kids, I don't think it's fair to ask the parents to also serve with the kids. So I feel like I would like to see a church that has the older generations working with the kids and the younger generations are getting ministered to and serving in other areas while they're getting ministered to, and then they can go and work with the kids after their kids are like after they're out of the kid stage. So
shout out to all you older church members who are doing that right now. Shout out to the Norman Wrights, and Vicki Adams was on last week, she's a grandma and she's now jumping in and serving. I think it's interesting because sometimes you can say, I've served my time. Well, maybe you've served in one area, but it could be a breath of fresh air to go somewhere else, and you learn a whole lot. Okay, so but now I'm going to force you to do the positive. Like, what have you appreciated or loved about the church?
I love how the church comes together. And I love all the small blessings you bring it up a lot, all the small blessings that are done behind the scenes that don't get acknowledged, but they're there.
Do you have an example? Maybe one that you have experienced yourself?
Well, just recently, many people know our basement has got flooded, and it's been a 2-year thing. And
wait, you're saying a house in Moberly has basement problems?
Yes. And it's been a 2-year thing, and it's just been frustration after frustration. And then just a few weeks ago, we got blessed with some money from anonymous people who were concerned.
Wow.
And we weren't really stressed about the money part because we had insurance, but it was just nice to have that know that people cared.
Oh, what a blessing!
And then the people,
and you can breathe a little bit.
Yeah. And the people who've been willing to come and do the manual work, especially when I'm home alone and I can't do it by myself. So it's all the things that come together in a church because we have Christ uniting us. That's what I love.
That's cool. I think when people underestimate, it is a lot to give to a community when you're talking about volunteering, but what you give, you also get. And not literally, but if you're giving and you're caring and you're loving, you receive that back from people around you.
Usually more, in more capacity than you are willing to give. You usually receive it more.
I was just talking to a lady who volunteered out at camp for the first time. She's like, I'm retired now, I don't really have an excuse, and was absolutely blown away by the kids and loved it. And she's like, unless something drastic happens, I told them for the next 3 years I'm going to do this. Or a couple of years I'm going to do this. And that was the camp nurse, which is one of the hardest spots, I think, to fill. So, it's absolutely true.
I was going to add, too, on the volunteering, God created us with each our own talents and desires. So not only when you're not participating are you missing out on things, but also the church is missing out on when you have conflict. So when you're not serving, when you're not being an active member of the church, then we're missing out on you.
Yeah. It's a body, and the body needs all of its members to be at least participate in what's going on. That's great. That's really good. I think sometimes for us, or at least people that grew up in church or grew up serving, have been on both sides of ministry, being an employee and also a volunteer, we sometimes forget. I mean, when did you start serving in the church? Didn't you start playing at an early age?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had, I became the song leader when I was like 12. Not full-time one, but like Sunday night, we started doing, this was a church that was very traditional. I started doing modern, contemporary, whatever. It wasn't modern. This was like the early
12-year-old Brian bringing this church into the 21st century.
We had like a big screen TV on stage.
Wow.
Well, before that, we had this, I don't know, it was like a little panel you set on top of an overhead projector that the computer hooked to. It was crazy. Yeah. Anyway, it changed the image like a moving over transparency, basically.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, stuff like that started doing sporadically, and then I don't remember the actual age that I was given the opportunity to take that over, probably like 16. But I had a lot of opportunity, and even before that was taught serving in the church. Like we just did it. Yeah. My parents, grandparents, this was a country church with one staff, so you had like the body of Christ had to do it all. Yeah. Sometimes, we're on staff. I'm glad the church employs us, but sometimes the multiple staff thing fuels the consumer mentality amongst the church. Because they're like, well, we have 8 staff. We don't really need to volunteer. Yeah. Well, yeah, you do, because the 8 staff are more or less managers. We still have to have all the people helping.
Yeah. I think on our end, if I wasn't that young when I started, but kind of the same mentality or same ideas. I've seen both sides of church for a long time, and I forget how intimidating it can be to just say, yeah, I'd like to help, or am I going to do it wrong? Am I going to mess something up? And but you're right, we need every person to participate, not just so that this church functions well, although that's part of it, but again, so that the body of Christ might be encouraged and edified, and also so that you can experience what it's like to give and to receive in a community. Well, that plays right into the blessing of the week, because the blessing of the week comes from a verse in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 6, verse 1. We were talking about this with our staff this morning or earlier today, and it says this. It's a warning that Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." And what he's warning about are people who engage in spiritual practices or service or doing things because they think it's the right thing to do in the eyes of God, but they only do it because someone else is watching. And the flip side of volunteering, I guess, could be is you're only doing it because you want recognition or someone to say good job, or maybe some improper motives. although some of that I think is natural. The motivation should be whether it's in public and people are seeing us, or it's in private, I'm doing this for the glory of God, not for myself. And the warning is, if you do it for other people's praise, you're never going to be satisfied. There's no reward. But the flip side of that means there's a promise. If you serve and give and do these things that you know are right in the eyes of God for His glory, the promise is for you. There is a reward. God is glorified, but He also rewards you with peace and knowing that you've done what is right in the eyes of God. So that's the encouragement, and I guess I'm pulling a Brian, which is a challenge for the week as well, which is consider your motivations when you serve, when you choose to do what is right. Are the things that we do, the actions that we do in righteousness or trying to pursue righteousness, should be motivated because we love God and we're trying to do what's right in His eyes. And if people praise us or if people curse us, that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't motivate us. What should motivate us is God pleased with what I'm doing. So there you go for the blessing of the week. Jessi, thank you so much for joining us. VBS is coming quick, so pre-register your kids and your grandkids. And if you want to help with buying stuff, there's multiple ways to do that that we've already talked about. We hope that you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on the Ripple Effect podcast. See you guys.